Are you ready to see some houseplants get roasted? Stick around and let's dive into it. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So today's video, for the people that have been here for a while, they know that I try as much as I can to keep my channel positive. I don't think today's video is going to be positive. And I will apologize profusely in advance. I do apologize, and I'm very sorry to anybody that this might offend, basically, on that ominous note. But yes, this is a video idea that came from a couple of comments that I got when I did my plant pet peeve video. And a lot of people said, oh, we actually thought, instead of you kind of doing pet peeves about, buying plants for shops or kind of like the community, that you were going to roast actual plants and basically tell us what you hate about actual plants. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, I like that. I like that. I do try to keep it positive, but there are a few plants that I have opinions on. And I will caveat this, like I usually do with a lot of my caveats, and say these have been my experiences growing most of these plants. Not all of them, but I will kind of say the ones that I have never grown and why I don't like them. Or why I just fell out of love with them quite soon, basically. So if this is a video that you want to watch, and it maybe is a bit less of a positive video, stick around. Let's look at the first plant, which I have got recently, and I will show you just now. So can anybody guess what this plant is? And you might not be able to because I don't have an emerging leaf at the moment. There is a new leaf coming here, and this was one of the purchases that I did on one of my Equigenera unboxings. Any guesses? So this is the Philodendron Lynamii. Now, I've got things to say about this plant. So the big thing about this is the emerging leaf is pink. Shall we start there? And I will say a little side note on this. I've only had one leaf emerge so far, and it was the one that was already in the cataphil when it's shipped. And it's this one here, which is obviously now gone fully green. But the whole hype on this is that it's gonna come in pink, and it's like almost bubblegum pink or like Barbie pink. Few things here, my experience again, based on that one leaf that I've had so far. I might change my opinion having seen the next one that would have grown in fully in my care, basically. Now, the pink situation is like a really kind of murky, muddy, peachy pink, basically. Think granny peach. The kind of peachy, pinky walls that you might get in your grand's house. Less of the Barbie versus Oppenheimer kind of thing. But I was hoping for that pink. And I have to say, this is something that goes across the board with a lot of the people that are fascinated with pink plants. In my experience so far, they're always slightly underwhelming. For me, they're not the kind of pink that I would be looking for. I'd kind of be looking for that kind of bubblegum pink. And apparently this one was meant to be bubblegum pink. Underwhelming. The other points I'm going to make about this plant, it's not a difficult plant to care for, don't get me wrong. Slightly annoyed that it's a crawler. I didn't realize that it's a crawler for some reason. In my head I had it as a climber, but I'm pretty sure this is a crawler, the way that it kind of is growing. Correct me if I'm wrong down below. The leaves that you're going to see for the majority of the time, and this goes along the lines of what I usually say about orchids. Make sure you kind of like the leaves of your orchids, because yeah, the blooms are great, but you'll have them for a maximum of a month or two, basically. You will be looking at very plain looking leaves, moving on from that. And the reason why I don't like the fact that this is a crawler, if it is a crawler, so far it looks like a crawler to me, is crawlers take up an awful lot of space in my kind of grow room / conservatory, all of these things. I've still got the Gloriosum down below. Still like those leaves. Am I annoyed at the amount of space it is taking? Yes. So, the leaves are nothing exciting, really. A bit blah. I'm quite glad I didn't spend the like obscene amounts of money that people wanted for this a while back. And the benefit of being able to get it for slightly more affordable prices from places like Ecuagenera is that if you think you like a plant and you get a plant and it's not been that great, you haven't spent that much money and you can potentially gift it, trade it, or kind of sell it to somebody else who really does want that plant. But underwhelmed is a word for this plant, I will say. And I think with a lot of these other plants now, there's maybe one plant I'm looking down because I've got a list. I don't own them anymore. That should tell you for multiple reasons. Some of them might be death as well. So the next one that I want to talk about is the Philodendron Varicosum. I'll see if I've got pictures for some of these plants and add them to the side there so you've at least got a visual representation of what these plants look like. So hopefully I'll find a picture of when I got my big Varicosum. Beautiful plant. Infested with spider mites. Not spider mites, I know spider mites are a big thing for it. Infested with mealybugs. It also was great, it was huge. I don't regret getting it at that size. It came in a really horrendous soil mix. I'm assuming it was a mother plant. It had issues from day one. It struggled a lot. I've still got a cutting somewhere rooting from it. For the velvetiness, meh. Does it have a bit of a sheen? Yes, it does have that kind of slight silvery iridescence because of that velvety on the leaves. That is cool. The red backs on the leaves, they're okay, but arguably, and I'll see if I can bring it up, the El Choco reds are a lot nicer, basically. And this gives me a lot less jip than that ever did. Does it get big leaves? Yes. Can it size up quite nicely? Yes. Does it have the fuzziness on the petioles that I generally like in other plants? Yes. But now owning something like the Philodendron serpens, I do prefer that, I will say. I don't know, I think generally for me, the red backs on leaves, it's okay. I'm assuming everybody kind of really got into that because of something like maybe the Louboutins, the red soles underneath the shoes, and there's something that kind of maybe in people's brains, kind of pop culture and all that stuff is something that's maybe exclusive because it's got the red undersides and all these things. It's okay. And I get it. And it's an interesting adaptation that a lot of these plants have as to where they're growing. But the Verrucosum for me, for the level of issues and spider mites and all of these other things, it's just a bit, it's not worth it for me. Again, a lot of this is going to be for me. I am fully expecting that this is going to offend some people. And as I said at the very beginning, I apologize again. But these are my opinions for these plants. We don't all have to like or agree on everything, basically. But yeah, I don't know. Which is why I don't have it in my collection. Nothing to poo-poo on other people, but I know because people actually wanted me to roast these plants from my point of view, this is my point of view, basically. Coming on another one that's got red undersides. I don't think I don't even know if I ever took a picture of my one, just purely because I ended up hating this plant from week 1 or week 2 of owning it. The Philodendron Lupinum. It kind of feels to me like the Philodendron Lupinum got so hyped up in the beginning from everybody that was buying it because it could transform into this beautiful plant. I still have not seen a mature form in anybody's collection. Correct me if I am wrong. I know some people can maybe buy the mature forms now, and the question that I have with that, considering how slow I found the plant to be, and other people as well, is are you sure that those plants aren't poached? Because these things take forever and they only became popular in the last few years, basically. Wow. was that the catfish of the plant, basically? Because everybody was just like, oh, look. And everybody thought that even if it's slow, it will eventually get there. Years later, people basically have a glorified micans with red backs. And it's underwhelming. And it grows super slow. And I could never find anything that made it happy. Tried moss poles, didn't work. Tried planks, didn't work. Tried support sticks, didn't work. Tried different light levels, didn't work. It was all the same. It didn't, well, eventually it died because I was just like, that was the only plant that I quite happily killed. That was murder 100%. Because I'm just thinking, I'm just not going to water you anymore. I don't care. You have annoyed me so much that I just don't care anymore. I think for me, this is the big one. This is the Philodendron Lupine. Just no. Somebody could give it to me tomorrow for free, and I would probably still say no. I really don't want it. You keep the Lupinum. Enjoy, basically, but not for me. Oh, just no, basically. Coming into a different looking philodendron. So this is the Philodendron Tortum, and I think there might be another word for it as well. I'll see if I can add it at the top there. I hopefully have a picture of this. I did buy this. I came across this during the pandemic days, and I got it. And I wasn't really that interested in it, but I'm just like, oh, it's come up, and it's not one that comes up very often. And I think I've spoken to a few other people that had the same plant. It's not bad looking, and I did mention this in the other video again. As I mentioned in the other video, I don't know if this one's coming out first or the other one, but I have got a wish list video that is coming up or has already come out. And there was, I think, the Monstera subpinnata, which has got similar-ish vibes, but I've heard good things about that. The Tortum, in my experience, and this is another one that I had in my care and it died, not because of the Lupinum where I murdered it, essentially, but it kind of slowly died, and when it died, I was just a bit like, meh, I'm just like, It was never happy. I tried it in like semi-hydro, it didn't like it. I tried it in soil, it didn't like it. It was because there was so little foliage for it to photosynthesize, it was very slow. It was a very wide plant. Now, don't get me wrong, if you've got the right lighting conditions for this plant, maybe in a conservatory, and you want something that's a bit more of a statement piece, and you don't mind it being wide and kind of weird looking, this might be one for you. But for the level, and I think this is true for a lot of the plants on this list, for the level of like difficulty, but just nothing made it happy. Do I think it's worth it? No. For me, the plant itself is not interesting enough for the level of work that you need to just keep it surviving, let alone thriving and growing well, basically. It was also infested with mealybugs. It was also infested with like thrips loved it, mealybugs loved it, spider mites loved it. And I'm just like, give me a damn break with this plant. There's barely any green on it. It grows super slowly. It doesn't like any of the substrates that I've given it. It doesn't like all the different light levels that I've given it. Ugh. I just know. Don't get me wrong, this is one that I think possibly in the right situation with the right care for the right individual, this might be one of their favorite plants. And I get that with this one. But for me, just no. It just wasn't worth it. Really wasn't. Coming on to a bit more of a common house plant. This might surprise people. And I used to have this plant, I don't have it anymore for the reason that I will say now, basically. The Peperomia string of turtles. And this is an interesting one because this is a bit of a, yeah, kind of and kind of not, basically. Do I love the look of it? Yes. Does it bring me memories of my turtles growing up? Yes, 100%. Is it a beautiful plant? Yes. The reason why I'm roasting it is anybody who has caught pests on this and maybe not caught it fast enough because you need to lift up all the leaves, and the moment that you touch the leaves, they come off anyway. So you try not to touch it. I got one mealybug, and I think I even maybe got spider mites on this, possibly, maybe thrips. They multiply like that, basically. And the problem that then happens with that is if you try in any form to kind of then remove those pests, especially with things like mealybugs where you need to kind of wipe them off and things like that, half of your plant is on the floor because it's so sensitive that it will just drop leaves all the time. So I'm just sitting there going, for me, this is a beautiful plant that if you live in a warm enough location and you can maybe grow it outside and let the other bugs do the pest control for you, beautiful plant. Absolutely amazing. Not particularly difficult to care for out of a lot of the peperomias. Not a lot of difficult, for me at least, in my experience, it wasn't that difficult to care for. But it's almost kind of like the moment that you get more than a few pests on it, and I'm just like, oh, that plant's done. But not, and that's the frustrating thing with this plant is I'm just like, I'm going to lose a plant that's taken me a while to get to this stage. I'm going to lose half of it because I'm going to have to deal with pests. So you're kind of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So those type of plants really do infuriate me sometimes. But as I said, I do still like the look of this one. Now, wider kind of roasting that's going to happen here as well. Peperomias for me, they're not for me. I've said this on other videos as well. Some of them, for the level of care that you need to do to them to keep them happy, and it might just me, I think apparently peperomias are meant to be quite easy for a lot of people. Not all of them. But for me, I'm just like underwhelmed, to say the least. I'm just sitting there going, because eventually I want to see big plants, and I know me now, and it's no shade specifically on the genus of plants, but the peperomia, I'm just like, it will stay small, and I get it. If you're in a tiny apartment and that's the only space that you really got, they're a great option. But for me, I'm just a bit like, I'd rather put my energy in other plants that I tend to have a bit more of a love for. But again, these are my opinions. Coming into a Hoya, this might surprise you, and this was one of the first rare Hoyas or the unobtainable Hoyas that I got, which was a full vine of Hoya kerrii. This is a sweetheart Hoya. This is the one that you get the one leaf in some soil and it will grow roots and it will keep living, but it will not do generally much more than that. I know there's that, I want to say urban legend that somebody who was cutting that leaf might have cut some of the stem and you might eventually get a vine. And everybody's been saying this for years now. It might be true, but I only ever, you know, the kind of stories that you hear are just like, oh yeah, I knew somebody that this happened to as well. I've never actually spoken to an individual that got one leaf that then got a vine. If you are one of those individuals, truly, do let us know in the comments. I would love to kind of virtually shake your hand because I would love to see the unicorn of a person that this happened to, basically. But yeah, everybody was like, I want to get it as a vine. And I had both the green form and the variegated form as well. And I think there was different formats of variegation to this. It's a cool plant. Arguably, it looks more interesting as a one-leaf thing because of that heart. The moment that it goes on a vine, it then just becomes a Hoya with a slightly lobed leaf, basically. If you squint hard enough, it's quite interesting that it's like all hearts. But for me, it's one of the hardier Hoyas, I will say that. It kind of almost grows a bit like an orchid. That's fine. The blooms are uneventful in terms of what they look like. They don't really have much of a scent, but this is the reason why I'm roasting this plant. Nobody warns you for the nectar that comes off and drips in thick globules off of these blooms, and it's red, and it does look a bit like blood. It stains everything. And it's one of those things that I know from a lot of people, they're just like, they'll either cut off the blooms or maybe even put a bag over the blooms. And I'm just like, but how do you like then not get it to go moldy? Oh. For that reason alone, for the blooms and for the fact that after a long period of time, it's a really kind of blah looking plant for me. I just can't deal with it. Ironically enough, I've still got two of them and I'm still watering them. One of them's kind of pretty much died, I think, at this point. And it was my fault because I think it dried out a bit too much. It then got watered There's probably no roots left on the main stalk of the plant. I'm still growing it. All the leaves are basically dust at this point. I'm still watering it. I do need to just bite the bullet with that plant and just go, I think you're dead. You need to go into the compost bin. The problem is it's on a very bright south-facing window and I don't have anything to replace it there at the moment. So that's why I'm just a bit like, oh, you still, from the outside, look like you're alive. So you might just stay there for a bit longer. It's better than a fake plant. It's a dead plant, you know? Coming on to a couple of plants that I don't have and one that I do have. A few plants that I don't have and one that I do have. So the one that I don't have, and I've got a version of this, so the medium variegated. And I know there's a lot of people that love this plant. There's a lot of people that have this plant. And this is generally, for me, that is the litmus test I find for people that are just generally into variegation in any format. The people that have got their medium variegata and they're happy to have it. Oh, this is going to offend so many people. For me, the variegated medium truly looks like it's diseased. It looks like something is wrong with it, basically, like it's got some form of virus. The variegation might even be a safe virus, but like, yeah, it just looks a bit sickly, basically. And don't get me wrong, I do love some variegated plants, but that one just, to me, the way that it grows, and I think, ironically enough, I think the variegated one grows faster than the non-variegated one. I've got the silver one or the blue one, or whichever one that one's called. That one's very slow. Does it run a lot? Yes. Does it occasionally still bring out a leaf? Yes. Do I still enjoy the blue one? Yes-ish. But yes. I don't think I've never owned the variegated one. I don't want to own the variegated one, and it's purely on the looks. I'm just like, it just looks a bit sick. For me, it looks a bit ill. This is a controversial one, and this came up at the plant market event in London, and I'm quite glad that Cheryl, who was there on the stage with me and Mo, and we were showing some of her amazing collection, she had a relatively established Ilsmanii, so Philodendron Ilsmanii. Let's see if I can find a picture and add it here, basically. And recently I got from Grow Tropicals, very small, but kind of like the ultimate dupe for the Ilsmanii, which was the Philodendron Snowdrift. It's not exactly the same leaf shape, but similar vibes. And I know that the Ilsmanii is one of the plants that a lot of people want. And I'm really glad that Cheryl brought it to that event for the very specific reason that in pictures, it seems interesting. In real life, I kind of look at it and just go, absolutely not. For that price, to get something like this, and from whatever some of the other people that were saying that have got one there, it's not the easiest plant. It's not the easiest plant to keep happy, to keep the coloration and all that stuff. And I'm just like, hard pass for me. Hard pass. Again, personal preference, and I know this is a wish list plant for a lot of people. And it's almost kind of why I want, because there's another wish list plant that's coming up on next on this list. It's almost one of those situations where you want a wish list plant because you look at a picture and you look at Instagram worthy pictures and people will take the best pictures of their plants, and you get the plant and you're just like, I spent all this money and I've been wanting this plant for such a long time, and it's so, and you built it up as well, and it's so underwhelming. This is one for me. This is not one that I desperately wanted, but I was always curious about, and I am so eternally grateful for being able to see it in person at that event, just purely on the reason that I just went, no. Hard pass, hard pass. There's nothing wrong with the plant, and I'm sure that there will be an audience for it. There already is, and I'm sure there's people get it and they're still happy with it. But for me, for my personal taste, I'm just a bit like, no, underwhelming. Underwhelming for that price. If that plant was between 20 and 50 Great British pounds, fine. Yeah, it's a good plant. It's an okay plant. It's fine. For the prices that it's going, absolutely not. No. Hard pass. Coming into a wishlist plant, and I have got two of these now. hysterically enough, because again, memo from however many years ago, would have never thought I would have had one of these. Can you guess where I'm going with this? Monstera obliqua Peru. Already, it's been a few months of having one of them and then probably almost a month or two of having the second one. Just runners. Just runners. I will not be growing this in a terrarium, and I point blank refuse to grow this in a terrarium because for me, even when you've got other plants around this is not enough of a showstopper of a plant for me to have as a centerpiece, which it would need to be in a terrarium. It's interesting looking, but I think even people growing it in a terrarium say that it runs all the time. Don't get me wrong, the prices that it's at now, much better, much better. If you want to attempt to get it, get it. I would have been so salty had I have got it for that price and realized how much it just runs permanently. The example that I was giving before of the medium, at least that grows at some point. But this plant, oh, just not worth it. Just not worth it. I'm sure if I was into it a bit more and I wasn't so kind of like a bit like, it's an interesting plant, I'm glad I got it, don't get me wrong, I've been wanting it for years. If the only thing I'm ever going to have is the four or five leaves that came from the growers and then just a whole bunch of running, just get a fake plant. It's a bit harsh, but like it's a bit like, well, like if a plant is just going to stay the same all the time and all it's just going to do is run, even before you've asked, I've tried to chop and prop wet sticks to propagate the runners, and I can understand now why people were saying it was risky back then. I have never, ever since starting to propagate plants in prop boxes and monsteras specifically, failed on every single wet stick that I tried to propagate with that one. That was impressively bad. So it might have been my conditions. It might have been maybe the propagation box was maybe a bit too dry. Fine. But I have to say, underwhelmed. Massively underwhelmed with this one. Glad I didn't spend that much money from it. Interesting, the thing that I will say, the side note, the plant that I got from Equigenera that was in semi-hydro, it at least brought out 2 or 3 new leaves when I first got it. I even gave it a moss pole, but I think this plant needs to kind of root out on the soil, basically. It then ran the whole time. I tried the cakey paste. I then chopped it, propagated it to see if the cakey paste was going to activate. No, all it did is branch from one runner to another runner, basically, and it's just not doing very much. If you've had experiences with this and you know how to stop it from running, or at least get it to actually bring out some foliage, please do let me know down below. But for me, that's why this plant is getting roasted. I'm just like, it really, like, it's what I was talking about with some of these other plants, that I'm just like some of the ridiculous prices with this, and I'm just like, I can't spend that kind of money. There's no shame on anybody that does, but I can't spend that kind of money. I don't have that kind of disposable income. I would like to be able to sleep at night. A plant could die at the drop of a hat, even with all of us that have been growing plants for years, let alone spending that kind of money worrying about that plant dying for one, and then realizing months, if not a couple of years later, that I'm just like, great, I've got the same 4 leaves that I had when I first spent a whole bunch of money on this plant and it doesn't do anything other than run. So yeah, glad I got them, don't get me wrong. Would I be getting more? No. I'll finish on a plant which, again, I think a lot of people really like, and I think this might ruffle a few feathers. Interestingly enough, because this has kind of always been a bit of the outsider, a bit of the underdog that quite a lot of people like, and I've never voiced my true opinions on this, and it is the Philodendron Varicosum, the Aurea, or the neon one, or the yellowy one. I don't know if I've ever seen the green one. I've generally ever seen the kind of neony greeny yellow one. Everybody's really into it. I kind of get it. And I know that it can grow massive leaves. That's what puts me off with this plant. Because it looks like a slightly interesting oak leaf-ish, but it's the size of a colocation leaf. And I'm just sitting there going, I don't have that kind of space for that kind of plant. Because it's something that doesn't interest me, it's a hard pass for me. Generally, neon-y, greeny plants I tend to like, because anything that's neon green, I am anybody's. But yeah, and I've never really spoken about this because I know so many people are fans of this plant. Yeah, it's a no from me. Too big, and it's interesting enough, but it's not interesting enough for me. Just a no. I don't think it's a particularly difficult plant to own, by the way. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I could at least comment on growth on some of the plants that I've owned, but the ones that I don't own, I can't really make that comment. I will wrap up with a specific plant that might surprise people, and it's a crawler. The Gloriosum. Still have it in my collection. Have two in my collection. I'm still keeping them in my collection. Whether or not this might be the year that I either sell them on or give them to somebody, I don't know. But, and I think it's not just the Gloriosum, it's a lot of the crawlers generally. And let me formulate my opinion on this a bit more. For me, again, I'll use the Philodendron Gloriosum as an example because when it gets going, it goes fast, basically. Show of hands down in the comments below, anybody that has had a Gloriosum for a few years and by this point is sick and tired of trying to find longer and longer and longer and longer and longer pots, basically. That's the issue. Don't get me wrong, a lot of these crawlers, if you're in an environment where they can be in your garden, oh, so jealous. Would love to have some of these crawlers in my garden. Absolutely stunning, and they can just run amok. The problem with crawlers, especially something that grows as fast when it's established, like the Gloriosum, is invariably you'll just have a plant that's just constantly head diving off the side of a pot, basically. And it still keeps going. But yeah, it's a bit cumbersome and it's a bit awkward, and what do you do with it now? And it always kind of looks a bit like, it's never tidy, and don't get me wrong, I've never been one for tidy plants, but I'm just a bit like, your pain, I need to move through you. It's beautiful, it's still beautiful, don't get me wrong, and this is one that I think I'm going to get a lot of hate for because there's a lot of people that love this plant. And as I said, I get it, I truly do get it. Watch my review video on this plant. I've got a lot of good things to say about the Gloriosum as well. But at the same time, crawlers are a pain in the bum, especially with big collections when you don't have an awful lot of space. You really, really need to be 100% sure that you want this, especially if you're planning on growing it for many, many years and want to have a very mature plant. You're going to have to find a place for it, really, and it's going to be a really kind of awkward, linear kind of place. And I know you can chop and prop it back into the pot, but yeah, it's a bit of a pet peeve kind of roasting of this plant for me. But yeah. When I said it was going to be a negative video, I did mean it. So I apologize again. But I will say it again, these are my opinions, and this is me roasting plants that predominantly I have owned in one way or another in the past, some that I don't, obviously. But yeah, I am curious, did any of this surprise any of you? Did I miss any? Have you got ones that you really have annoyances and want to roast? Do so down below. Vent. Get it off your chest, and sometimes you might end up falling in love with that plant again after you've roasted it. But this has been quite cathartic, actually. I quite like it. I'm just like, I didn't have to bite my tongue for this video. It's great. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon, and I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.